My daughter thought the reflection in the microwave door was just a blur. She thought 69 years of life had made my eyes cloudy and my mind weak. She was wrong. I saw the small blue vial tremble in her hand. I saw the clear liquid drip into my pumpkin soup. And when she turned her back to grab a spoon, I did the only thing a father who just paid off his child's $50,000 debt could do. I switched the bowls. You won't believe what happened next. But before I tell you how my own flesh and blood ended up on the floor gasping for air, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful family member a lesson they would never forget. The Chicago winter wind was howling against the kitchen window, rattling the frame, but the chill inside my house was far worse. I sat at the head of the mahogany dining table, a spot I had occupied for 40 years. My hands were folded on the tablecloth. To anyone looking, I was just Harold King, a retired chemistry professor, perhaps a bit slowed by age, perhaps a bit lonely since my wife passed. But my mind was as sharp as the scalpel I used to use in the lab. I was watching Rebecca, my only daughter. My pride and joy, or so I had told myself, for 32 years. She was standing by the kitchen island, her back to me. The stainless steel microwave was mounted above the stove, and the dark glass acted like a perfect mirror. She didn't know that. She was too busy trying to keep her hand steady. I watched her pull a small glass vial from her cardigan pocket. It wasn't a prescription bottle. It was unlabeled. The liquid inside was a pale, innocent blue. She uncorked it with a quick, jerky motion. I saw her hesitate for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. I held my breath, hoping, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years, that she would stop, that she would remember the pony rides, that she would remember the college tuition I paid in full, that she would remember that just last week I wrote a check to American Express for $50,000 to clear the debt she and her husband Todd had racked up on designer clothes and vacations they couldn't afford. She didn't stop. She tipped the vial. 3 drops, 4, 5, into the steaming bowl of pumpkin soup, my favorite. She stirred it quickly, the metal spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. That sound, that soft clink, was the sound of my heart breaking. It was the sound of the final severing of the bond between father and daughter. She turned to the sink to rinse the spoon. This was it. I didn't stand up. I didn't scream. Years of handling volatile chemicals had taught me that panic causes explosions. Precision prevents them. I leaned forward. My movements were silent. I grabbed my bowl with my left hand and her bowl with my right. I slid them across the polished wood. The friction was soundless. Swap. It took 3 seconds. When she turned back around, drying her hands on a dish towel, I was sitting exactly as I had been. Hands folded. Eyes gazing vacantly at the snow piling up in the backyard. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face was stone. Todd walked in then, my son-in-law. He was wearing that cheap cologne he insisted was imported. He rubbed his hands together, bringing a gust of cold air with him from the garage. "Smells great, Becca," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. He walked over to me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy like a shackle. "How are we feeling tonight, Harold?" Ready for some warm soup, I looked up at him. I saw the sheen of sweat on his upper lip. It was 68 degrees in the house. Why was he sweating? I knew why. Because he was a failed real estate agent with a gambling problem I wasn't supposed to know about. Because he was the one who had probably sourced that blue vial. "I am hungry, Todd," I said. My voice sounded raspy. "Good." I played the part. The old man. The mark. Rebecca brought the bowls over. She placed one in front of me. The clean one. She placed one in front of her empty seat. The poisoned one. "Sit, Dad," she said. Her voice was tight. "Eat while it is hot." She sat down across from me. Todd took the seat at the end. The triangle of betrayal. I picked up my spoon. I saw them both tense up. Todd stopped midway to pulling out his chair. Rebecca's eyes were locked on my hand. They were waiting. They were waiting for the old man to take his medicine. I dipped the spoon into the thick orange liquid. I brought it to my lips. I blew on it gently. I could feel their gaze burning into me. I took a sip. "Delicious," I said. I saw Todd exhale. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. Rebecca forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I am glad you like it, Dad," she said. She picked up her own spoon. I watched her. I watched the woman I had taught to ride a bike. The woman I had taught the periodic table to. I remembered a Tuesday afternoon when she was 10. She had asked me, "Daddy, what happens if you mix bleach and ammonia?" I had sat her down and explained the chemical reaction, the chloramine gas, how it burns the lungs. I taught her that chemistry respects no one. It is cause and effect. Action and reaction. If you introduce a foreign agent into a system, the system reacts. She was introducing the agent into her own system now. She took a large spoonful. She swallowed. "Eat up, Rebecca," I said softly. "You need your strength." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The only sound was the scraping of spoons. I ate slowly, savoring every bite of the soup that was meant to be my last meal. It tasted of nutmeg and cream. It tasted of survival. Todd was eating fast, shoveling food into his mouth as if to get it over with. He kept glancing at me, then at his watch, so Harold Todd said, his mouth half full. Rebecca and I were talking. We were thinking about the house maintenance. "It is a lot for you, isn't it? With the snow and the roof repairs." "Here it comes. The pitch." "It is fine, Todd," I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "I manage." "But do you?" Rebecca chimed in. She put her spoon down. "Dad, you left the garage door open last night. And last week you forgot to pay the water bill. We are just worried." I hadn't forgotten the water bill. I had placed the check in the mail on Monday. And the garage door, Todd had the code. He had probably opened it himself to gaslight me. "I am fine," I repeated. Maybe Todd said, leaning in. "But we found this great facility. Assisted living. Top tier. Just outside the city. We think it might be time to look at it." "Just look." I looked at Rebecca. She was taking another bite of soup. "Is that what you want, Becca?" I asked. "You want to put me in a home?" She swallowed. "It is for your own good, Dad. We just want you to be safe." Safe. The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. Suddenly Rebecca frowned. She dropped her spoon. It clattered loudly against the bowl. She brought a hand to her throat. "What is wrong?" Todd asked, looking at her. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice sounded wet. "It tastes bitter." "Must be the sage," I said calmly. I took another sip of my soup. "Tastes fine to me." She coughed. A dry, hacking cough. She rubbed her chest. "It is hot in here," she said. "Is the heat on too high?" She pushed her chair back. She looked pale. The color was draining from her face faster than I had ever seen. Digitalis. It had to be. I recognized the signs. I was a chemist, after all. Foxglove extract. It causes nausea, vomiting, and then cardiac arrhythmias. In high doses, it stops the heart. It mimics a heart attack. A perfect weapon for killing an old man with high blood pressure. But Rebecca had a strong heart. Her metabolism was faster. It would hit her differently. "My vision," she stammered. She blinked rapidly. It is blurry. There are halos around the lights." Todd stood up. "Becca." "You okay? I feel sick." She gagged. She doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Oh, God." I sat still. I watched the chemistry experiment unfold. Todd rushed to her side. What is it? Is it the flu? She vomited on the floor. Violent. Sudden. I stood up then, but I moved slowly like the old man they thought I was. Oh dear, I said. Dad, help me, Todd yelled. She is burning up. He touched her forehead. She was convulsing now, her body seizing up in the chair. She slid off and hit the floor with a thud. It is not the flu, I said. My voice was cold steel. Todd looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. What? That looks like a reaction, I said. What did you put in the soup, Todd? He froze. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw the terror of a man caught in his own trap. We didn't... Nothing. What are you talking about? She is poisoned, Todd, I said. Call 911, unless you want her to die right here on the kitchen floor. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling over the screen. Rebecca was gasping for air. Her eyes were rolling back in her head. Her hands clawed at the linoleum. She looked at me. In that moment of agony, clarity returned to her eyes. She looked at me, then at the empty bowl in front of her, then at the bowl in front of me. She knew. Dad, she wheezed. You. Don't try to speak, honey, I said, kneeling beside her. I didn't touch her. I just leaned close. Save your energy. You are going to need it to explain this to the police. Todd was screaming into the phone. Yes. My wife, she is having a seizure. I don't know, she just ate dinner while his back was turned. I saw it. Rebecca had dropped a tissue from her pocket when she fell. Wrapped inside was the empty vial. She hadn't thrown it in the trash. She had kept it on her. Amateur. I reached out and palmed the tissue. I slid it into my cardigan pocket. Exhibit A. The sirens were audible in the distance within minutes. We lived close to the fire station. Todd was kneeling over her, crying now. Real tears, maybe. Or maybe tears for himself because he knew his plan had gone spectacularly wrong. She is going to be okay, right? Harold, she has to be okay. I stood up and looked down at them. The greedy daughter. The desperate husband. I don't know, Todd, I said. Depends on the dose. He snapped his head up. The dose, I didn't answer. I walked to the window and watched the red lights of the ambulance reflect against the snow. They were coming to save her. For now. But the real poison wasn't in the soup. It was in this house. And I had just started the process of flushing it out. The paramedics burst in. Chaos took over the kitchen. They loaded her onto the stretcher. Sir, are you coming? The paramedic asked Todd. Yes. Yes, of course. He looked at me. Dad, are you coming? I looked at the mess on the floor. The vomit. The spilled soup. I will follow in my car, I said. I need to get my coat. They rushed her out. The door slammed shut. The silence returned to the kitchen. I walked over to the sink. I picked up my bowl of soup. I poured the rest of it down the drain and turned on the disposal. The evidence of my survival disappeared with a whir. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tissue with the vial. I held it up to the light. There was a single drop of blue liquid left at the bottom. I went to the hall closet, put on my heavy wool coat and my hat. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look like a fragile old man. I looked like a man who had just declared war. I walked out into the cold Chicago night, the snow crunching under my boots. I wasn't just going to the hospital to check on my daughter. I was going to finish what they started. As I drove toward the hospital, the city lights blurring past my phone rang. It was my lawyer, Leonard Banks. I had texted him a single code word while the paramedics were working foxglove. Harold Leonard's voice was deep gravelly. You initiated the protocol. Is it done? They tried tonight, Leonard, I said, keeping my eyes on the icy road. Digitalis in the soup. Jesus, Chew, Leonard breathed. Are you okay? I am fine. Rebecca ate it. There was a long silence on the line. Leonard Banks was the only person who knew the full extent of my net worth. He knew about the $15 million from the pharmaceutical patent I sold 5 years ago. He knew I had been pretending to be a middle-class pensioner to test my family. He knew the test results were failing. She ate it, Leonard asked. I switched the plates. Harold, that is complicated. It is self-defense, I said. Now listen to me. I am heading to Mercy Hospital. Todd is going to try to spin this. He is going to say I am senile. He is going to say I confused the ingredients. He is going to try to push for the conservatorship tonight. I will meet you there, Leonard said. I will bring the papers. We freeze everything I said. The joint accounts, the credit cards, the mortgage payments. I want them to feel the cold, Leonard. I want them to know what it feels like to have absolutely nothing. I hung up. I pulled into the hospital parking lot. I could see Todd pacing in the brightly lit emergency room entrance. He was on his phone again, probably calling his bookie, or maybe a lawyer. I turned off the ignition. I sat in the dark car for a moment. I thought about the little girl who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. That girl was gone. She had been replaced by a stranger who would poison her own father for an inheritance. I stepped out of the car. I walked toward the sliding glass doors. The daughter thought I didn't see her, but I see everything. And tonight, everyone else would see it too. The antiseptic sting of the emergency room air burned my nostrils, a sharp contrast to the winter chill I had left outside. I sat on the edge of a hard plastic chair, my coat pulled tight around me, watching the double doors where they had taken Rebecca. Todd was pacing back and forth in front of the nurse's station, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. He was putting on a show, running his hands through his hair, demanding updates, playing the part of the terrified husband to perfection. But I saw the way his eyes darted around the room, checking the exits, checking the faces of the officers who had just arrived. He wasn't terrified for his wife. He was calculating the odds of his survival. A doctor pushed through the swinging doors. He looked exhausted, his scrubs wrinkled. Dr. Patel, his badge read. He scanned the waiting area and his eyes landed on us. Todd rushed him before he could even take a breath. Is she alive? Todd shouted, grabbing the doctor's arm. Tell me she is alive. She is stable, Mr. King, the doctor said gently, removing Todd's hand. But it was close. We have identified the toxin. It is digitalis, a massive overdose. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Digitalis, foxglove, a common garden plant, beautiful and deadly. A plant that I, Harold King, the retired chemistry professor with a passion for botany, had growing in my greenhouse. Todd froze. For a split second, I saw the gears turning in his head. He had expected the doctor to say food poisoning or an allergic reaction. He hadn't expected them to identify the specific poison so quickly. But Todd was a survivor, a cockroach who thrived in the dark, and he pivoted faster than I gave him credit for. He spun around and pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. It is him, Todd screamed, his voice cracking with manufactured hysteria. It is the old man. The two police officers standing by the entrance stepped forward, their hands resting instinctively on their belts. The room went silent. Everyone, the nurses, the patients with broken arms and fevers, turned to stare at the white-haired man shrinking into his coat. What are you talking about, sir? One of the officers asked, stepping between Todd and me. He grows it, Todd yelled, spit flying from his lips. He has a garden full of weird plants. Foxglove. He grows foxglove. He makes these teas, these herbal remedies because he doesn't trust modern medicine. He turned his wild eyes on me. You did this, Harold. You confused the jars again, didn't you? You put your poison in the soup, thinking it was parsley or some other weed. The officer turned to me. His expression wasn't accusatory yet, but it was wary. "Sir, do you grow foxglove?" This was the moment, the fork in the road. I could stand up straight in my spine and tell them that I was a sane man who had just outsmarted a murder attempt. I could tell them about the debt, the switch, the blue vial in my pocket. But if I did that now, it would be my word against theirs. It would be a messy domestic dispute. Todd would lawyer up. He would hide the money trail. He would claim I was paranoid. No, I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had won. I needed to be the prey so they wouldn't see the trap snapping shut around their ankles. I let my shoulders slump. I allowed my hands to tremble, visibly rattling the buttons on my coat. I widened my eyes, letting them fill with the watery confusion of the elderly. I don't know, I stammered, my voice weak and thready. I have a garden, yes. I dry herbs. For tea. For seasoning. You see, Todd shouted triumphantly. He admits it. He is losing it, officer. He has been forgetting things for months. Leaving the stove on, forgetting names, wandering off, I told him not to cook anymore. I told him it was dangerous. I looked down at my hands, playing the part of the shamed, confused father. I thought it was Basil, I whispered just loud enough for the officer to hear. The jars. They look so similar. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Oh God, did I hurt Becca? The officer's stance softened immediately. He didn't see a murderer. He saw a tragedy. He saw a senile old man who had made a terrible mistake. He looked at Todd with sympathy. It sounds like an accident, sir, the officer said. A terrible accident. An accident, Todd screeched, but I could see the relief washing over him. He had an out. He didn't have to go down for attempted murder. He could pin it on my failing mind. It was perfect for him. Better than perfect. It laid the groundwork for the conservatorship. He almost killed my wife, Todd yelled, forcing tears now. He is dangerous. He can't be left alone. We have been trying to get him help, trying to get him into a facility, but he refuses. I buried my face in my hands and let out a sob. It wasn't hard to cry. I was crying for the daughter who had sat at that table and watched me eat, waiting for me to die. I am so sorry, I wept. I am so confused lately. I just wanted to make a nice dinner. The doctor looked uncomfortable. Mr. King, digitalis toxicity is very specific. We need to know exactly how much was in the food to treat her effectively. Do you have the plant matter? I threw it out, I stuttered. In the disposal. I cleaned up. I wanted the kitchen to be clean. Todd shook his head, looking at the officers with a pleading expression. You see, he destroyed the evidence because he doesn't even realize what he did. We can't let him go back to that house alone. He is a danger to himself and everyone else. The officer nodded slowly. Sir, we might need to ask you some more questions, but for now. I need to sit down, I gasped, clutching my chest. I feel dizzy. Nurse, the officer called out. They ushered me into a wheelchair. As they wheeled me away from the waiting room, I looked back at Todd. He was wiping his face with a handkerchief, talking rapidly to the other officer. He looked devastated. But as the automatic doors slid shut between us, I saw it. A tiny momentary smirk. He thought he had done it. He thought he had turned a botched murder into the golden ticket to control my life and my millions. He didn't know that in my pocket, wrapped in a tissue, was the glass vial with his wife's fingerprints on it. He didn't know that while he was screaming about my memory, I was memorizing every word he said to use against him in court. He thought I was a senile old man losing his grip on reality. He had no idea he was staring into the eyes of a chemist who was just waiting for the reaction to reach its boiling point. I let them wheel me into an examination room. I let them check my vitals, and I waited for the darkness to settle so I could make my next move. The game had changed, and Todd had just played his hand perfectly into mine. The nurse left me alone in the examination room, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a starting pistol. She had told me to wait for the doctor, offering me a warm blanket and a sympathetic smile reserved for the confused and the elderly. As soon as the latch clicked, the tremor in my hands vanished. My spine straightened, shedding the weight of 20 years. I wasn't the frail old man trembling in a wheelchair anymore. I was the man who had negotiated with pharmaceutical giants and walked away with a fortune. I stood up and moved to the door, pressing my ear against the cold wood. I could hear the chaotic rhythm of the emergency room outside, the squeak of rubber soles, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the low murmur of anxious families. Todd would be out there, probably pacing, probably rehearsing his lines about my dementia, or maybe calling his creditors to promise them that the payout was imminent. He had no idea that the clock was already ticking down on his own life, not mine. I opened the door a crack. The coast was clear. I slipped out and walked briskly down the hallway, my steps silent and sure. I ducked into the single-occupancy restroom near the nurse's station and locked the door behind me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh clinical glare on the white tiles. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run to mask my voice, a habit from years of conducting business in places where walls had ears. I pulled my phone from my inner coat pocket. It wasn't the jitterbug phone Todd insisted I use. It was a sleek, encrypted smartphone that contained the keys to a kingdom my family didn't even know existed. I dialed a number I had memorized a decade ago. It rang once. Leonard Banks answered immediately. He didn't say hello. He simply said, "Status." They took the bait. "Leonard," I said, my voice low and steady, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The old man in the glass looked tired, his eyes rimmed with red, but the man behind the eyes was cold and calculating. Todd is spinning the narrative. He is accusing me of senility. He is claiming I confused the foxglove with herbs. He is laying the groundwork for an emergency guardianship hearing. Good, Leonard replied, the rustle of papers audible in the background. That was the projection. If they file for guardianship, they open themselves up to discovery. We can subpoena their financial records to prove motive. Exactly, I said. But we need to accelerate the pressure. They are desperate, Leonard. Todd has bookies breathing down his neck. He needs liquidity fast. That is why they rushed the poisoning. If they think they have won, if they think I am about to be locked away, they will try to drain the accounts immediately. Let them try, Leonard scoffed. They think they are robbing a piggy bank. They don't realize they are trying to break into Fort Knox. That brings me to the reason for this call, I said, leaning closer to the mirror. It is time to drop the curtain. For 40 years, I let them believe I was just a high school chemistry teacher with a modest pension and a paid-off house. I let them think my savings were the result of coupon clipping and frugality. I never told them about the patent. I never told them about the nights I spent in the garage lab synthesizing the hydrophobic polymer coating that is now used on every surgical instrument in the country. I never told them I sold the rights 15 years ago for $12 million. I kept it a secret because I wanted to know if they loved me or if they loved my wallet. Tonight, I got my answer. Execute Protocol Shield, I ordered. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that carried the weight of total financial warfare. Protocol Shield was the nuclear option. We had designed it years ago, a contingency plan for a worst-case scenario I had prayed I would never have to use. Are you sure? Harold Leonard asked, his voice losing its professional edge for a moment. Once we do this, there is no going back. It freezes everything. The joint checking account you share with Rebecca, the credit cards you authorized for Todd, the mortgage payments on their house that you secretly subsidize, the monthly stipends. Everything goes dark. I am sure, I said, my voice hard. They tried to kill me, Leonard. They watched me eat poison and smiled. I want every card they swiped to be declined. I want every ATM to spit their cards back out. I want their phones to light up with foreclosure warnings. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to feel exactly as helpless as they wanted me to be. Understood, Leonard said. I am initiating the lockdown now. By the time you walk out of that bathroom, they will be destitute. The only money they will have is the change in their pockets. And Leonard, I added, watching a drop of water fall from the faucet. Flag the accounts for fraud. If they try to access anything, I want the bank to notify the police. Make it look like an automated security response. I want them paranoid. I want them turning on each other. Consider it done, Leonard said. Stay in character, Harold. The next 24 hours are going to be volatile. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I looked at the mirror one last time. I ruffled my hair, making it look unkempt. I slumped my shoulders, curving my spine back into the shape of a defeated old man. I practiced the vacant stare, the trembling lip. I turned off the faucet. The silence returned. I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the hallway, shuffling my feet, looking lost and small. Inside, the chemist was mixing the final ingredients for an explosion, but outside, I was just a confused father looking for his room. I walked back toward the examination area, ready for the next act, knowing that miles away in a server room, my real power was just coming online, and my family was about to learn that the man they tried to bury was the only thing keeping them afloat. I slumped in the uncomfortable vinyl chair of the hospital waiting room, my chin resting heavily on my chest, my breathing shallow and rhythmic. To the passing nurses and the weary orderly mopping the floor, I was just another exhausted old man worn down by the trauma of the night. A father who had almost lost his daughter to a terrible accident. But beneath the brim of my hat, my eyes were open just a slit, and my ears were tuned to a frequency of desperation that only a man like Todd could emit. Todd was pacing near the vending machines a few yards away. He was vibrating with anxiety, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He kept checking his phone, the screen illuminating his pale, sweaty face in the dim light of the corridor. He looked like a trapped animal, and I knew exactly why. The poison hadn't worked. The police hadn't arrested me. And now the silence from his end was about to be broken by the people he feared more than the law. His phone buzzed. It wasn't a ringtone. It was a harsh, angry vibration against his thigh. Todd jumped as if he had been electrocuted. He fumbled to get it out of his pocket, nearly dropping it on the linoleum. He looked at the screen, and I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse standing upright. He didn't answer immediately. He looked around, his eyes darting over the empty chairs, the sleeping families, and finally landing on me. I let out a soft snoring wheeze, shifting my weight slightly, as if settling deeper into sleep. Satisfied that his audience was unconscious, Todd answered the phone. He didn't say hello. He just whispered a frantic, hushed hiss that carried perfectly in the sterile silence of the hallway. I know what time it is, Sal. I know. He turned his back to me, hunching his shoulders as if trying to make himself small enough to disappear. Please, you have to listen to me. There was a complication. A medical complication. No, not me. The asset. I almost smiled. The asset. That was what 40 years of fatherhood had been reduced to. I wasn't a person. I wasn't a father-in-law. I was an asset to be liquidated. Todd listened for a moment, and then he began to tremble violently. He gripped the phone so hard, his knuckles turned white. No, Sal, please don't touch her. She is in the hospital right now. We are at mercy. He listened again. 500. Yes. 500,000. I know the number. I swear to you, Sal, it is coming. It is locked up in probate. Well, it was supposed to be probate. There was a long pause. Todd reached up and touched his left hand, running his thumb over his ring finger. 7 days, Sal. That is not enough time to... He stopped. He was listening to a description of violence that I could only imagine, but Todd's reaction told me everything I needed to know. He pulled his hand away from his face as if it had been burned. Okay. Okay, 7 days. Or the finger. I understand. I will get it. I swear on my mother's life I will get it. Just don't come here. He hung up. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the vending machine, his chest heaving. $500,000. $500,000. That was the price of my life. That was the debt he had accrued gambling on futures he didn't understand, and horses that didn't run fast enough. I had known he was bad with money. I had bailed him out of a $50,000 hole just last week, but I hadn't realized he was digging a grave that deep. Todd wiped his face with his sleeve, took a deep, shuddering breath, and turned toward the recovery rooms. He needed to talk to his partner in crime. He needed a new strategy, because murder had failed, and the sharks were circling. I waited until he pushed through the double doors leading to the patient rooms. I counted to 10. Then I stood up. My joints popped a genuine sound of age, but my movement was fluid. I followed him. I moved down the hallway, sticking to the shadows, my footsteps silent. I saw him slip into room 304. The door didn't click shut. It stayed ajar just a fraction of an inch. I pressed my back against the wall next to the doorframe, closing my eyes, focusing everything on the voices inside. Rebecca was awake. Her voice was raspy, weak, stripped of the sugar-coated veneer she usually used with me. "You look like hell, Todd," she said. "Sal called," Todd whispered. The panic was back in his voice, raw and unfiltered. "He gave us a week." 7 days, Becca. Or he starts sending pieces of me in the mail. Rebecca let out a low groan. I hate him. I hate that old man. Why isn't he dead, Todd? I put enough digitalis in that soup to kill a horse. He ate it. I watched him eat it. He must have a stomach like a goat, Todd spat. Or maybe the dosage was wrong. It doesn't matter now. Plan A is dead. The police are already asking questions about the garden. If we try anything physical again, they will be watching. So what do we do? Rebecca asked, her voice rising in hysteria. We can't wait for him to die of natural causes. We don't have years. We have a week. Todd paced the small room. I could hear his shoes squeaking. We pivot, he said. We go to Plan B. We force the issue. Plan B, Rebecca asked. You mean the home? No, not just a home, Todd said, his voice dropping lower, becoming more sinister. A conservatorship. Total legal control. We don't need him dead to get the money, Becca. We just need him declared incompetent. But the doctor... Dr. Patel said he seemed lucid, Rebecca argued. Dr. Patel doesn't know him, Todd countered. Look at what happened tonight. He poisoned his own daughter because he confused parsley with foxglove. That is what the police report is going to say. That is the narrative. He is dangerous. He is senile. He is a threat to himself and others. I held my breath. They were rewriting reality. They were taking my survival and turning it into a weapon against me. We file for emergency guardianship tomorrow morning. Todd continued the plan forming rapidly in his desperate mind. We get a court order. We freeze his assets. Once we have power of attorney, we can liquidate the house. We can access the retirement accounts. We can pay Sal. But what if he fights it? Rebecca asked. He can be stubborn. Let him fight. Todd scoffed. Who is the judge going to believe, a loving daughter recovering from poison in a hospital bed, or a confused old man who keeps poisonous plants in his kitchen? We act concerned. We act heartbroken. We tell the judge we are doing this to protect him. We put him in that facility upstate, Rebecca said. The secure one. The one with the high walls. Exactly, Todd said. We lock him away where he can't hurt anyone, and we take control of the estate. It is clean, it is legal, and it solves the problem in 48 hours. I stepped away from the door. I had heard enough. My blood was running cold, not from fear, but from an icy, crystalline rage. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to erase me. They were going to strip me of my rights, my name, and my freedom. They were going to use the law as a bludgeon to steal what I had built. I walked back toward the waiting room, my mind racing. They thought they were playing chess, but they were still playing checkers. They thought the only money I had was the house and the pension. They didn't know about the offshore accounts. They didn't know about the patent royalties. And most importantly, they didn't know that I had just activated a protocol that would turn their financial world into a desert before the sun came up. I sat back down in the vinyl chair, assuming my position of the sleeping, frail old man. Let them file their papers. Let them call their lawyers. They were about to find out that trying to trap a chemist is a dangerous game. Because while they were planning to lock me up, I was about to blow the roof off their entire lives. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. The 7-day countdown had begun for Todd, but my countdown was much shorter. The silence in the car on the way back from the hospital was heavy enough to crush a lesser man. But I sat in the back seat, humming a tuneless melody, watching the frozen Chicago streets roll by. Rebecca was slumped in the passenger seat, her skin the color of wet ash, still weak from the purging of the poison. Every now and then she would cast a hateful glance at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes burning with a mixture of nausea and venom. Todd gripped the steering wheel as if he were trying to strangle it, his knuckles white, his jaw working silently. He was driving too fast, weaving through traffic with the desperation of a man who could hear the clock ticking down on his own life. We pulled into the driveway, the tires crunching on the snow I hadn't shoveled. The house looked dark and uninviting, a stage set for a tragedy that was only halfway through its second act. Todd helped Rebecca out of the car, supporting her weight as she shuffled toward the front door. I followed behind them, moving with the exaggerated slowness of the infirm, clutching my coat collar against the wind. Inside, the air was stale, smelling faintly of the pumpkin soup I had poured down the drain. Todd settled Rebecca onto the living room sofa, piling blankets on her, until she looked like a cocoon of misery. "I need water," she croaked, her voice sounding like sandpaper on stone, "and something to eat. My stomach is empty." "I will go to the store," Todd said, checking his watch. He was jittery, his eyes darting around the room. "I need to get things, electrolytes, crackers, maybe some soup." He looked at me. "Don't touch her," he warned. "Don't you dare go near the kitchen." I raised my hands in a gesture of surrender, letting my lower lip tremble. "I am just going to sit in my chair, Todd. I am tired. So tired." Todd grabbed his wallet and keys. "I will be back in 20 minutes, he told Rebecca. "Then we figure this out." He slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house. I walked to my leather armchair in the corner, the one that faced the window and the sofa. I sat down and watched my daughter. She was staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow. "Why didn't you die?" she whispered, not looking at me. "It would have been so much easier." I didn't answer. I just looked at her with sad, watery eyes, while inside my mind was calculating the distance to the grocery store and the exact moment Todd would be standing at the checkout counter. I imagined it vividly. He would pile the belt high with expensive recovery drinks, organic broths, maybe a bottle of wine for himself to take the edge off. He would watch the total climb. He would slide his card, the platinum one linked to my primary account, the one he had been authorized to use for emergencies, but used for golf clubs. And then the beep. The decline. I checked the grandfather clock in the hallway. 10 minutes. He would be there now. He would be trying the second card. The one I opened for Rebecca. Declined. He would be sweating. He would be trying the debit card for the joint household expenses. Declined. Account frozen. Flagged for suspicious activity. He would be standing there under the fluorescent lights with a line of impatient shoppers behind him, realizing that the plastic in his wallet was just useless scrap. He would have to walk away. He would have to leave the bags. He would have to walk back to his car with nothing. the humiliation burning his cheeks, the realization dawning that the well had run dry. It took him 40 minutes to return. I heard the car screech into the driveway, the engine cutting off abruptly. The front door flew open so hard it banged against the wall, knocking a picture frame askew. Todd stormed in. He didn't have any grocery bags. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He looked like a man who had just stared into the abyss and found it empty. "You!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Rebecca sat up, alarmed. "Todd." "Where is the food? There is no food!" Todd yelled, kicking the door shut. The cards didn't work. "None of them what?" Rebecca asked, confusion clouding her face. "What do you mean they didn't work?" "Declined all of them, insufficient funds. Issuer restricted." I tried the credit, the debit, even the emergency card. I stood there like a beggar. He marched over to my chair, towering over me. I shrank back, pressing myself into the leather, making myself small. "What did you do?" Todd hissed, spit flying from his lips. "What did you do to the accounts?" I blinked rapidly, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "The accounts," I stammered. Oh, yes. Leonard." Todd froze. "Leonard." "Your lawyer," I nodded slowly. "I called him. From the hospital. After the accident with the soup." I was so scared, Todd. The police were asking questions. I felt so confused. So Todd demanded, "What did you tell him?" I told him I was losing it. I whispered, my voice trembling. I told him I couldn't trust myself anymore. I told him I almost hurt Becca because I couldn't tell the jars apart. I told him I needed protection. "Protection?" Rebecca asked, her voice rising. "Yes," I said. Leonard said, "He said that if I am becoming senile, I am vulnerable. He said scammers target old people like me. He said I needed to lock everything down. Protocol Shield, he called it." Todd looked as if he had been punched in the gut. "Protocol Shield? What the hell is that?" I shrugged helplessly. "I don't know the legal terms, Todd. He said he was freezing everything. To protect me. He said until a judge reviews my case, nobody can spend a penny. Not even me. He said if I want to buy a pack of gum, I need a court order." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, leaving nothing but ringing ears and dust. "You froze the money," Todd whispered, his voice trembling with horror. "All of it." "To keep us safe," I said, smiling weakly. "So I don't get scammed." Leonard said it was the responsible thing to do. "You idiot," Todd screamed, grabbing his hair with both hands. "You senile old fool. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I did what was best," I said, my voice wavering. Leonard said, "To hell with Leonard." Todd roared. He spun around and kicked the coffee table, sending magazines flying. "We need that money. We need it now." "Why?" I asked innocently. "We have food in the pantry. We have a roof. Why do we need money right now, Todd?" He couldn't tell me. He couldn't tell me about Sal and the fingers and the 7-day deadline. He just stood there, panting, his eyes wild. Rebecca struggled to stand up. "Dad, call him back. Call Leonard. Tell him to unlock it. Tell him it was a mistake." "I can't," I said sadly. He said it is a legal process now. Once the protocol is active, it takes weeks to reverse. He said it is for my own good. "Weeks," Todd choked. "We don't have weeks," he looked at Rebecca. Panic was setting in, cold and hard. They were realizing that the trap they had built for me had just snapped shut on their own legs. They had wanted a conservatorship. They had wanted to prove I was incompetent. Well, I had just given them exactly what they wanted. I had acted so incompetent that the law had stepped in to protect me from everyone, including them. "Cash," Todd muttered. "We need cash. There has to be cash in the house." He looked around the room, his eyes landing on the antique secretary desk in the corner, the one where I kept my correspondence. "Where do you keep it?" he demanded, turning to me. "The emergency fund. The stash. Every old man has a stash." I usually use the bank," I stuttered. "Liar," Todd shouted. He ran to the desk and ripped open the drawers. He dumped the contents onto the floor, papers, pens, old stamps. He rifled through them frantically. "Nothing." "Check the bedroom," Rebecca yelled, adrenaline temporarily overriding the poison in her system. Under the mattress, in the closet, they went into a frenzy. It was pathetic and terrifying to watch. Todd ran up the stairs, his heavy footsteps thudding overhead. I heard drawers being pulled out and thrown against the walls. I heard the crash of a lamp. He was tearing my bedroom apart, looking for the bundles of cash he imagined I had hoarded. Rebecca limped into the kitchen. I heard the clatter of ceramic jars being overturned. She was checking the cookie jars, the freezer, the space behind the loose brick in the pantry. I stayed in my chair. I didn't move. I listened to the destruction of my home, and I felt a strange sense of calm. Let them look. Let them destroy the furniture. They wouldn't find a dime. I had moved the cash years ago. The only thing they would find was dust and their own desperation. Todd came back down the stairs a few minutes later, red-faced and empty-handed. He was holding a small wooden box he had found in my closet, my wife's jewelry box. "This is it," he screamed, shaking the box. "Costume jewelry, where are the diamonds? Where is the gold?" "Mom was buried with her rings, Todd," I said softly. "You know that." He threw the box across the room. It shattered against the fireplace, spilling cheap bead necklaces across the hearth. "We are screwed," he whispered. He looked at Rebecca. "Sal isn't going to wait for a court order." "What do we do?" Rebecca asked, her voice trembling. Todd looked at me. His eyes were dark, filled with a malice that had moved beyond greed into something primal. "Survival." "We accelerate," he said. "We don't wait for the hearing. We get him committed now. Tonight." "But the lawyer," Rebecca started. "Forget the lawyer," Todd snapped. "We find a doctor who will sign the paper for cash. We get him locked up in a psych ward. Once he is in, we become his legal guardians by default. We can override the lawyer. We can force the bank to open the accounts." He walked over to me, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. I could smell the sour fear on his breath. "You are sick, Harold," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You are very, very sick. You are seeing things. You are hurting people. And we are going to get you the help you need, even if we have to drag you there." I looked back at him, blinking tears into my eyes, pretending to be the terrified old man. But inside I was smiling. They were desperate. They were reckless. And they were about to make the mistake that would put them in prison forever. "Okay, Todd," I whispered. "Whatever you say." "Good," he said, straightening up. He pulled out his phone. "I know a guy, Dr. Evans. He lost his license, but he still has a prescription pad. He will be here in an hour." He walked into the kitchen to make the call. Rebecca slumped back onto the sofa, watching me with cold, dead eyes. I sat back and waited. Let them bring their fake doctor. Let them try to drag me away. I had one more card to play, and it was hidden in the chemical compound I had painted on the safe upstairs just before I left for the hospital. The game was entering the endgame, and they didn't even know they were already in checkmate. The heat in the house was suffocating, a physical weight that pressed against my chest and made the air thick and difficult to breathe. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking into my shirt, but when I looked across the living room, Todd was wearing a heavy wool sweater and rubbing his arms as if he were standing in a blizzard. Rebecca was wrapped in a thick afghan, her teeth chattering with a theatrical intensity that would have been comical if their intentions weren't so deadly. They had cranked the thermostat up to 85 degrees, turning the house into a sauna, but the psychological temperature they were trying to set was absolute zero. I wiped my forehead with a trembling hand playing my part. "It is very warm in here, isn't it?" I asked, my voice weak and confused. I pulled at my collar. "Maybe we could crack a window." Todd looked at me with wide, incredulous eyes. "Warm, Harold, it is freezing. The furnace is barely keeping up with the draft. Look at the thermostat." He pointed to the digital readout on the wall. It read 62 degrees. I knew he had tampered with the sensor, or simply taped a fake image over the screen, but to the senile old man I was pretending to be, it was reality warping before my eyes. I blinked, trying to focus, letting my jaw drop slightly. "But I am sweating, Todd," I whispered. "That is hypothermia," Dad Rebecca said from the couch, her voice dripping with fake concern. "When you get too cold, your body gets confused. It is called paradoxical undressing. You think you are hot, but you are actually freezing to death. Put your coat on, please." She held out my heavy winter coat. I stared at it. The room was spinning with heat. Putting that coat on would be torture. But if I refused, I was belligerent. If I put it on, I was compliant but crazy. They were rewriting my sensory inputs, trying to make me doubt the very skin I lived in. I took the coat. I put it on. The heat became unbearable instantly. I felt dizzy, my pulse hammering in my ears. "There," Todd said, smiling tightly. "Better. You look pale, Harold. You are shaking." I was shaking from heat exhaustion, but to them it was proof of my decline. I sat in my chair, trapped in layers of wool, while they watched me with the cold, predatory patience of vultures waiting for the animal to stop kicking. The afternoon blurred into a series of orchestrated, maddening events. I placed my reading glasses on the side table to rub my eyes. I closed them for 10 seconds. When I reached out, the glasses were gone. I patted the table. I looked at the floor. Nothing. "What are you looking for?" Todd asked, not looking up from his phone. "My glasses," I mumbled. I just set them down. Right here." "You haven't had your glasses all day," Harold Todd said casually. "You left them in the bathroom this morning. Remember, you said they were hurting your nose." I stared at the empty table. I knew I had just taken them off. I could still feel the phantom weight of the frames on my nose. But the table was bare. I could have sworn," I stammered. Todd sighed, a long, loud exhalation of frustration. He stood up and walked into the kitchen. A moment later, he called out, "Harold, come look at this." I hauled myself up, the heavy coat weighing me down, and shuffled into the kitchen. Todd was standing by the open refrigerator. He pointed to the middle shelf right next to the milk carton. My glasses were sitting there, frosted over with cold. "Why did you put your glasses in the fridge?" Harold Todd asked, his voice gentle, patronizing. "Were you trying to cool them down?" I stared at the glasses. It was clumsy. It was obvious. But it was effective. I don't remember doing that," I whispered. "That is the problem," Dad Rebecca said, appearing in the doorway. "You don't remember anything anymore. You are dangerous. What if you put the car keys in the microwave? What if you put the cat in the oven?" "We don't have a cat," I said automatically. "Not anymore," Todd said darkly. "Not since you let it out last winter. We never had a cat. Never." But in that moment, with the heat pressing in and my glasses sitting in the fridge, the edges of my reality felt soft, malleable. This was gaslighting in its purest, most brutal form. They weren't just lying to me. They were dismantling my history brick by brick. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to scream, to lash out, to give them the excuse to call Dr. Evans and say, "He is having an episode. Come get him." I lowered my head. I grabbed the cold glasses. I am tired," I said. "I think I will go to my room." "Good idea," Todd said. "Get some rest. You need it." I climbed the stairs, my legs heavy. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. It didn't lock. They had removed the lock weeks ago, claiming it was a safety hazard in case I fell. I took off the coat and threw it on the floor, gasping for cool air. I opened the window a crack, letting the winter freeze bite my skin, grounding me, reminding me that I was alive, I was sane, and I was angry. Night fell, bringing with it a new kind of torment. I lay in bed feigning sleep, my breathing deep and even. I heard the floorboards creak in the hallway. The door handle turned slowly. They came in like ghosts. I kept my eyes closed, my body relaxed, but my senses were on high alert. I could smell Todd's stale sweat and the cloying scent of Rebecca's lotion. They stood over the bed, looking down at me. "He is out," Todd whispered. "Look at him," Rebecca hissed. "He looks so peaceful, while our lives are falling apart." They leaned closer. I felt their breath on my face. "You are crazy, old man," Todd whispered, his voice a low rhythmic chant right in my ear. "You are losing your mind. You don't know where you are. You belong in a hospital, a nice padded room. You are sick." Rebecca joined in, whispering in the other ear. "You are a burden. Everyone is laughing at you. You tried to kill your daughter. You are a monster. They were trying to reprogram my subconscious. It was a crude technique, but relentless. They did this for 10 minutes, a stream of poisonous suggestions meant to seep into my dreams and rot my confidence from the inside out. Finally, they pulled away. "Check the safe again," Todd whispered. "Maybe he wrote the combination down somewhere new." I heard them rummaging through my dresser drawers, quiet as mice. They checked the pockets of my pants. They looked under the rug. They were desperate for the code to the wall safe hidden behind the painting of the ship in the storm. They knew there wasn't cash in the bank accounts anymore, so they had convinced themselves I must have a physical stash. They left empty-handed, closing the door silently. I waited. I counted to 1,000 in my head, visualizing the periodic table, grounding myself in the immutable laws of the universe. Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, facts, truth, things they couldn't touch. When the house was silent, I sat up. I didn't turn on the lamp. I moved by the moonlight, filtering through the sheer curtains. I walked to my closet and reached into the back inside the pocket of an old raincoat I hadn't worn in years. I pulled out a small opaque jar and a UV flashlight. I wasn't just a chemistry professor. I was an inventor. And this jar contained a compound I had synthesized for fun years ago, an invisible powder that reacted to the oils in human skin and glowed a brilliant, undeniable crimson under ultraviolet light. It was adhesive, transferable, and impossible to wash off with just water. I moved to the painting of the ship. I swung it open, revealing the steel face of the safe. It was a sturdy model, impossible to crack without a drill or the code. I put on a pair of latex gloves from my first aid kit. I opened the jar. Carefully, methodically, I brushed the fine powder onto the keypad. I dusted the handle. I coated the entire front panel of the safe. The powder was invisible to the naked eye. To anyone looking, the safe was just cold steel. But to anyone who touched it, it would be a branding iron. I closed the painting. I stripped off the gloves and hid them. I hid the jar. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting. They were desperate. The loan sharks had given them a deadline. They wouldn't wait for the court order. They wouldn't wait for the doctor. They would try to crack the safe tonight. They would think I was asleep, broken by the heat and the confusion. They didn't know that I had just turned the object of their desire into the evidence of their crime. When Todd touched that keypad, he wouldn't just be trying to steal my money. He would be painting a target on his own hands. And tomorrow, when the police arrived, I wouldn't need to say a word. I would just turn on the light, and his guilt would shine like blood in the dark. Let them whisper. Let them hide my glasses. Chemistry doesn't lie, and by morning, the reaction would be complete. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 2 a.m. the sound reverberating through the floorboards like a funeral toll. I was already awake, of course. I had been awake since the moon rose, sitting in the wingback chair in the shadows of my bedroom, wrapped in a dark blanket that merged with the gloom. My phone was in my hand, the screen dimmed to the lowest setting, the camera app open and waiting. I wasn't just an old man hiding in the dark. I was a hunter in a blind, waiting for the predators to return to the bait. I knew they would come. Desperation has a scent acrid and metallic, and the entire house reeked of it. Todd had been pacing downstairs for hours, the vibrations of his footsteps transmitting his panic through the frame of the house. The 7-day deadline from his loan shark was burning a hole in his mind, and logic had long since abandoned him. I heard the creak of the stairs. It wasn't the stealthy creep of earlier. It was heavy, clumsy. He didn't care about waking me anymore. In his mind, I was either catatonic from the gaslighting or too feeble to stop him. I moved silently to the closet. I had cracked the door earlier, creating a perfect line of sight to the painting of the storm-tossed ship on the far wall. Behind that painting was the wall safe. Behind that safe door was absolutely nothing but empty space and dust, but Todd didn't know that. He thought it was the end of the rainbow. Todd entered the room. He didn't even look at the bed where he assumed I was sleeping. He went straight for the painting. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn all day, sweat stains dark under the arms. He swung the painting open with a violent jerk, the frame hitting the wall with a thud. I pressed the record button on my phone. He stared at the keypad. I could see his profile illuminated by the moonlight. He was muttering to himself a manic stream of numbers. Birthdays, anniversaries, my social security number. He reached out and punched in a code. Beep. Red light. He tried again. Faster this time, his fingers mashing the buttons. Beep. Red light. He slammed his fist against the steel door. The sound was a dull clang that made me wince, but I kept the camera steady. "Open, you son of a bitch," Todd hissed. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. She looked like a ghost in her pale nightgown. Her hair matted her face, still gaunt from the poisoning. She didn't look at the empty bed either. She just watched her husband unravel. "He changed it," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He couldn't have. Todd snapped, not looking at her. "He is senile. He puts his glasses in the fridge. He doesn't remember what day it is. How could he remember to change a safe combination?" "Maybe he isn't as crazy as we want him to be," Rebecca said. She walked into the room. She stood right next to him. I zoomed in. I needed this. I needed them both in the frame. Todd turned to her, his eyes wide and wild. "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that. He is cooked, Becca. His brain is mush. He probably changed it by accident. He probably mashed the buttons thinking it was the microwave." He tried another code. Beep. Red light. Todd let out a strangled cry of rage. He turned and walked to the fireplace. He grabbed the heavy iron poker from the stand. "Todd, no," Rebecca said, but she didn't move to stop him. She just watched. "I am opening this thing," Todd growled. "I don't care if I have to peel it off the wall." He swung the poker. It connected with the keypad with a deafening crash. Sparks flew. The plastic casing of the keypad shattered, but the locking mechanism was internal hardened steel. He swung again and again. He was panting, grunting with every blow, a man trying to bludgeon his problems to death. "Stop it," Rebecca hissed. "You are going to wake the neighbors." "I don't care about the neighbors," Todd yelled, dropping the poker. It clattered on the floor. "I care about the 500 grand I owe Sal. I care about my fingers, Becca. There has to be cash in there. There has to be." He leaned his forehead against the cold steel of the safe, defeated. He placed his palms flat against the door, sliding them down, leaving a trail of sweat and oil. Perfect. He was coating himself in the invisible powder I had applied hours ago. He was marking himself with evidence that would be impossible to wash away. Rebecca stepped closer. She placed a hand on his back. It was a gesture that should have been comforting, but there was no warmth in it. "We should have used more," she whispered. I held my breath. This was it. The camera was rolling. The audio was crisp. Used more what Todd asked, lifting his head. "The digitalis," Rebecca said. Her voice was cold, a simple statement of fact. "We should have doubled the dose. The old man should have died after that soup, Todd. We shouldn't be dealing with safes and lawyers. We should be planning a funeral." There it was, the confession. Clear as a bell. Todd turned to look at her. He didn't look horrified. He looked regretful. "I know," he said. "I messed up the extraction. I didn't concentrate it enough. He shouldn't be here." Rebecca continued looking around the room with disdain. "He is just taking up space. He is sucking up resources that belong to us. He lived his life. Why can't he just let go? Why does he have to make it so hard for us? Because he is selfish," Todd spat. "He has always been selfish, sitting on a pile of money while we drown. He hit the safe one last time with his open hand." "We stick to the plan," Todd said. "Tomorrow. Dr. Evans comes at 9. We get the signature. We get the order. We drag him out of here, kicking and screaming if we have to. Once he is in the ward, we get power of attorney. Then we get a locksmith. A professional one. And if Evans doesn't sign," Rebecca asked, "then we suffocate him with a pillow and say his heart gave out." Todd whispered, "I am done playing games, Becca. I am not losing my hands for this old fool." I stopped recording. My hand was trembling not from age but from the sheer adrenaline of staring pure evil in the face. I had known they were greedy. I had known they were desperate. But hearing my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, wish for my death because I was taking up space, it severed the last thread of attachment I had. The father in me died in that closet. Only the chemist remained. They left the room a few moments later, leaving the shattered remains of the keypad on the floor. I heard their footsteps fade down the hall. I heard their bedroom door click shut. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I stepped out of the closet. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I pulled the UV flashlight from my pocket. I walked over to the safe. I clicked the light on. The beam hit the safe and the darkness erupted into color. It was a masterpiece of forensic art. The safe door was smeared with glowing crimson handprints. They shone with a violent neon intensity in the black room. I could see the whorls of Todd's fingerprints perfectly preserved on the steel. I could see where he had slapped the metal in frustration. I could see the dust on the floor where the poker had landed, speckled with the glowing powder that had fallen from the keypad. But that wasn't all. I walked to the doorframe where Rebecca had been standing. I shone the light. There on the white paint was a partial print. She had leaned against it, and on the floor a glowing trail of footprints leading out into the hall. The powder transfers. It travels. Todd had touched the safe, then he had touched his pants, his face the doorknob. I followed the trail. It led down the hall. It led to their bedroom door handle. The handle was glowing red. I went back to the safe. I took photos, high-resolution close-ups. I took photos of the smashed keypad. I took photos of the poker lying on the rug. I took photos of the glowing handprints that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Todd had tried to break into my property. I had the audio confession of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. I had the video of the violent attempted robbery. And now I had the physical evidence that linked them to the scene, glowing like the fires of hell they were about to walk into. I turned off the UV light. The room plunged back into darkness. I went back to the closet and retrieved a small travel bag I had packed days ago, hidden behind my winter coats. I checked the contents, my passport, the hard drive with the backups of my accounts, the original patent documents, and the file on Dr. Evans that Leonard had compiled. I wasn't going to wait for morning. I wasn't going to wait for Dr. Evans and his syringe. They planned to ambush me at 9 a.m. They planned to drag me away. They were going to find an empty bed. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered street. It was silent and peaceful, a stark contrast to the violence that had just occurred in this room. I was leaving this house. I was leaving the memories. I was leaving the life of Harold King, the retired teacher. I slipped the phone into my pocket. The evidence was secure. The trap was primed. I just had to step out of the blast zone. I opened the window. The cold air hit me bracing and clean. I was 69 years old, but as I climbed out onto the sturdy trellis that led down to the garden, moving with a strength born of righteous fury, I felt reborn. The reaction was complete. The catalyst had been added. Now all I had to do was watch it burn. I had one leg over the windowsill, the freezing night air biting at my skin, ready to descend the trellis and vanish into the Chicago winter. But I stopped. My boot hovered over the frozen wood. Leaving was survival. Staying was victory. If I disappeared now, I would just be a missing person, a wandering senior lost in a storm. Todd would spin the narrative. He would tell the courts I had walked away in a fugue state. He would get his conservatorship in absentia, and I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. No. I needed them to commit the crime. I needed them to sign their names to a lie so big it would bury them. I needed Dr. Evans to put his pen to paper. I pulled my leg back inside. I closed the window and latched it. I hid my go-bag under the loose floorboard beneath the bed, ensuring it was invisible but accessible. Then I sat in the wingback chair, smoothed my hair, and waited for the sun to rise. At exactly 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly chime. It was a summons. I heard Todd's heavy footsteps rushing to answer it, the murmur of voices in the foyer, and then the distinct wet cough of a smoker. I didn't wait for them to come get me. I walked out to the landing and looked down. Todd was shaking hands with a man who looked like he had been assembled from spare parts of better men. Dr. Evans was tall but stooped, wearing a suit that had been expensive 10 years ago but was now shiny at the elbows. He carried a battered leather medical bag that looked more like a prop than a tool of healing. His face was a roadmap of bad decisions, broken capillaries on his nose, a nervous tic under his left eye, and a sheen of sweat that the winter chill hadn't dried. Todd looked up and saw me. For a second, he looked terrified, as if he expected me to be holding the poker or screaming about the safe. But I just gripped the banister with trembling hands and blinked slowly. "Good morning, Todd," I said, my voice cracking perfectly. "Who is your friend?" Todd exhaled, his shoulders dropping. He put on his concerned face, the mask slipping easily back into place. "This is Dr. Evans Harold. He is a specialist. He is here to help us. Help you." I walked down the stairs, taking them one at a time like a toddler. I stopped in front of the doctor. He smelled of peppermint, trying to cover up stale bourbon. "A specialist?" I asked. For the house, Dr. Evans smiled, revealing teeth that had seen too much coffee. For the mind, Mr. King. For the memory. "Your son tells me you have been having some trouble distinguishing reality lately." I looked at Todd. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I am fine," I whispered. I get confused sometimes." "Shall we sit?" Evans asked, gesturing to the living room as if it were his clinic. We sat. Rebecca came in from the kitchen holding a cup of coffee. She didn't offer me any. She sat next to Todd, clutching his arm, playing the part of the worried daughter. Dr. Evans pulled a clipboard from his bag. He clicked a silver pen. "Let's start with the basics, Harold. Can you tell me what year it is?" I stared at him. It was a trap. If I got it wrong, I was crazy. If I got it right, he would say I was guessing. "It is 2024, I said, making it a question. Evans wrote something down. He didn't look up. "And who is the President of the United States?" I answered correctly. He wrote again, Harold. "Your family tells me you have been exhibiting aggressive behavior, violent outbursts. Is that true?" I looked at the fireplace where Todd had smashed my wife's jewelry box. I looked at the wall where the safe was hidden behind the painting. "I don't like loud noises," I said softly. "They scare me." Evans nodded, scribbling furiously. "Paranoia. Hypersensitivity." "And the incident with the soup," Evans asked, his eyes drilling into mine. "You poisoned your daughter, Harold. Did you know you were doing it? Did the voices tell you to do it?" I felt a spike of cold rage in my gut. He wasn't diagnosing me. He was building a narrative. He was feeding me the lines he wanted me to say. "I thought it was parsley," I mumbled, looking at my hands. Dr. Evans stopped writing. He leaned forward. "Parsley doesn't come in a blue vial, Harold." I froze. I looked up at him. How did he know about the vial Todd? Todd must have told him about the vial he thought I used. But I had never mentioned a vial to the police. I had only said jars. "You talked to Todd about the vial?" I asked, dropping the senile act for a microsecond. Evans blinked, realizing his slip. I am speaking hypothetically. The point is, you introduced a foreign substance." He turned the page on his clipboard with a snap. "Let's do a cognitive test. I am going to say 3 words. I want you to repeat them back to me in 5 minutes. Apple, table, penny." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat on his upper lip. I looked at the tremor in his hand, holding the pen. Apple. Table. Penny, I repeated. We sat in silence. Todd tapped his foot. Rebecca chewed her lip. The clock ticked. 5 minutes passed. "Okay," Harold Evans said. "What were the words?" I looked at him blankly. "What words?" I asked. Todd let out a sigh of relief so loud, it sounded like a tire deflating. Evans smiled a predatory smile. He wrote on his clipboard in large block letters. I could read it upside down. "Severe cognitive decline. Immediate danger." He stood up. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He turned to Todd. "It is worse than you described," he said, his voice grave. "He is completely detached. The memory loss is profound. Coupled with the violent episode, I cannot in good conscience recommend he stay in this environment." Rebecca started to cry. Fake dry sobs. "Oh, Dad, I am so sorry." "What is the diagnosis?" Dr. Todd asked, trying to hide the eagerness in his voice. "Acute dementia with psychotic features," Evans declared. He ripped the page off the clipboard and handed it to Todd. "This is a medical hold recommendation. He needs a secure facility, somewhere they can manage his episodes." Todd took the paper. He looked at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, doctor. We just want him to be safe." I stood up. "I have to go to the bathroom," I said. "Sit down, Harold," Todd snapped. "We aren't done." The doorbell rang again. Todd checked his watch. "That will be Mr. Sykes." "Mr. Sykes?" I asked. "The social worker," Rebecca said, wiping her dry eyes. "We called him to help with the transition." Todd went to the door. He came back with a man who looked like a thumb in a cheap suit. Mr. Sykes was short, broad, and had the dead eyes of a bureaucrat who had sold his soul for a pension. He didn't look at the room. He looked at the paperwork Todd shoved into his hands. "Dr. Evans's report." Sykes asked, his voice a monotone drone. "Right here," Todd said. Sykes scanned it. He nodded. He looked at me for the first time. He didn't see a person. He saw a file number. "Mr. Harold King," he said. "I am an emergency caseworker with Adult Protective Services. Based on the medical evaluation provided by Dr. Evans and the sworn affidavits from your family regarding the poisoning incident, The state is intervening. Intervening? I asked, my voice trembling. You are being placed under a temporary 5150 hold for emergency psychiatric evaluation, Sykes said. You have been deemed an imminent danger to yourself and others. A hold, I stepped back. You are taking me away. We are transporting you to the Greenbrier Behavioral Health Center, Sykes said. They have a bed waiting. The transport team is 5 minutes out. Greenbrier. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the unwanted, a place where they sedated you until you forgot your own name or until your family drained your accounts and stopped paying the bill. You can't do this, I whispered. This is my house. It is for your own good, Dad, Rebecca said, standing up. She walked over to me. She put her hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, possessive. We can't take care of you anymore. You tried to kill me. You need help. I looked at her. I looked at the triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the piece of paper in Sykes's hand was a checkmate. When I asked, "When are they coming?" Sykes checked his phone. The transport van is delayed by the snow. They will be here in 24 hours. Until then, you are remanded to the custody of your son-in-law. You are not to leave this house. If you try to leave, the police will be called and you will be arrested. 24 hours. They were giving me a window, a countdown. Todd looked unhappy. Can't you take him now, Sykes? We don't feel safe. Protocol. Sykes shrugged. The beds are full until tomorrow morning. Just lock his door. Keep him contained. We will be here at 8 a.m. sharp. Sykes handed Todd a carbon copy of the order. It was a pink slip, the color of a dismissal. Keep this, Sykes said. It grants you temporary emergency guardianship until the court hearing next week. Todd took the paper. His hands were shaking, but this time with excitement. He had it. The golden ticket. With that paper, he could walk into the bank. He could talk to the mortgage company. He could call Sal and tell him the money was coming. Sykes left. Evans left, clutching an envelope of cash Todd had slipped him by the door. The three of us were left alone in the living room. The silence was thick, electric. Todd looked at the paper. He kissed it. He actually kissed it. He looked at me. His face twisted into a sneer. Go to your room, Harold, he said. I stood my ground for a moment. I looked him in the eye. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that he was holding a warrant for his own arrest, not a guardianship. But I held it back. The trap wasn't sprung yet. I need my pills, I said weakly. Todd laughed. A harsh barking sound. You don't need pills where you are going, old man. They have plenty of juice at Greenbrier. Now move. He grabbed my arm. He dragged me toward the stairs. He shoved me up the steps. Rebecca watched from the bottom and her arms crossed. Don't forget to lock it this time, Todd. Screw the safety hazard. Nail it shut if you have to. Todd pushed me into my bedroom. I stumbled and fell onto the rug. Sleep tight, Harold, he said. Enjoy the bed. It is the last night you will ever spend in it. He slammed the door. I heard the click of the lock. They had reinstalled it while I was at the hospital. Then I heard the sound of a power drill. He was screwing a bracket into the frame. He was sealing me in. I lay on the floor for a moment, listening to the whir of the drill. He was building a prison. I stood up and brushed off my knees. I walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, a white curtain erasing the world. 24 hours. I didn't need 24 hours. I needed 20 minutes. I went to the bathroom attached to my suite. I opened the cabinet under the sink. I pushed aside the toilet paper and the cleaning supplies. There in the back was a plastic jug of industrial drain cleaner, high-concentration sulfuric acid. I used it for the stubborn pipes in the old house. I carried the jug to the bedroom door. I looked at the hinges. They were painted over layers of white latex, but underneath they were brass, soft metal. Todd thought he had locked me in. He thought steel and wood could hold a chemist. He forgot that metal dissolves. He forgot that wood burns. He forgot that I knew the melting point of every material in this house. I poured a small amount of the acid into a glass cup. I pulled a pipette from my go bag. I wasn't going to Greenbrier. I was going to the bank. And then I was going to court. But first, I had to melt my way to freedom. I applied the first drop to the top hinge. It hissed. A wisp of acrid smoke rose up. It smelled like victory. I worked silently, methodically, one drop at a time, weakening the structure, eating away the integrity of their cage. Downstairs, I heard corks popping. They were celebrating. They were drinking my wine, toasting to their victory, counting money they would never touch. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow, when the van arrived, all they would find was a door hanging off its hinges and a chemical burn on the floor where I had walked out of their lives forever. The doctor had signed the paper, yes, but he had signed it with a pen I had provided during the memory test, a pen filled with ink that faded to invisible within 12 hours. By the time they got to court, that medical order would be a blank sheet of paper. I applied another drop. The hinge groaned. Almost there. The smell of dissolving metal is distinct. It is acrid biting and tastes like copper pennies on the back of the tongue. In a ventilated lab, it is a warning. In a sealed bedroom at 2 a.m, it is the scent of freedom. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed frame, watching the chemical reaction do the work that my aging muscles could not. The sulfuric acid from the drain cleaner was a viscous, heavy liquid. I had applied it carefully, using a glass dropper from my travel kit, soaking the wood around the screws of the heavy iron bracket Todd had drilled into the door frame. I wasn't trying to melt the steel bracket itself. That would take days. I was attacking the substrate. I was destroying the wood that held the screws in place. Cellulose and lignin break down rapidly when introduced to a high molarity corrosive. The wood hissed softly, bubbling and turning a charred, oily black. It was a slow violence, a quiet erosion, exactly like the way my family had eaten away at my life for the last decade. Downstairs, the house was silent. The celebration had ended hours ago. I imagined Todd passed out on the sofa, an empty bottle of expensive scotch, my scotch, dangling from his hand. I imagined Rebecca dreaming of the shopping spree she would go on once I was locked away in Greenbrier. They were sleeping the deep, untroubled sleep of the victorious. They didn't hear the faint sizzle of their victory turning to ash. I checked my watch. 3:15. The transport van was scheduled for 8. I had a 5-hour lead provided I could get out of the subdivision before the snowplows started their morning runs. I stood up and tested the bracket. I pushed against the door with my shoulder. The wood groaned. It was soft, pulpy, compromised. I needed one sharp, decisive force. I wrapped a thick towel around my shoulder to muffle the sound. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale air of my prison. I thought about the soup. I thought about the blue vial. I thought about the way Todd had looked at me when he said I wouldn't need my pills anymore. I threw my weight against the door. There was a wet crunch, a sound like a tree branch snapping in a storm. The screws pulled free from the dissolved wood, taking chunks of black sludge with them. The door swung open. I didn't step out immediately. I froze, listening. The house settled. The refrigerator hummed downstairs. No footsteps. No shouts. The silence held. I grabbed my go bag from under the floorboard. It was light, efficient. I put on my heavy coat, my hat, and my gloves. I took one last look at the room. I looked at the bed where I had slept for 30 years, the place where I had mourned my wife, the place where I had decided to save myself. I would never see this room again. Good. It was a crime scene now. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards were treacherous, prone to creaking, but I knew every inch of this house. I knew where to step. I hugged the wall, moving like a shadow. I reached the top of the stairs and looked down into the foyer. The streetlights outside cast long, skeletal shadows through the transom window. I descended slowly, one hand hovering over the rail, but not touching it. I didn't want to leave any more prints than necessary, even though I knew the house was already covered in the UV powder I had spread earlier. I reached the bottom floor. The living room was to my left. I couldn't resist. I crept to the doorway and looked in. Todd was indeed on the sofa, his mouth open, snoring softly. Rebecca was curled up in the armchair, wrapped in a blanket. The air smelled of alcohol and triumph. On the coffee table, illuminated by the standby light of the television, was the pink slip, the emergency guardianship paper, the key to my shackles. I walked over to the table. I moved with the silence of a ghost. I reached out and picked up the paper. Dr. Evans's signature was scrawled at the bottom in the blue ink of the pen I had lent him. I looked at it closely. The lines were already starting to fade, the chemical composition of the ink reacting with the air breaking down the pigment. By the time they presented this to a judge, it would be a blank page, a ghost document for a ghost prisoner. I placed the paper back on the table exactly where it had been. I wanted them to wake up to it. I wanted them to grab it in the morning rush to the van and hand over a piece of nothing. I walked to the back door. The front door was too loud, too exposed. The sliding glass door in the kitchen led to the garden, to the trellis I had climbed earlier, to the alleyway. I unlocked it. The mechanism clicked, a sharp sound in the quiet kitchen. Todd snorted in his sleep and shifted. I froze. He mumbled something unintelligible and settled back down. I slid the door open. The cold hit me like a physical blow, a wall of ice and wind. It was 20 degrees below zero with the wind chill. Chicago in February is not a place for the old or the weak, but I wasn't weak. I stepped out into the snow. I closed the door behind me. I was out. The wind tore at my coat, trying to push me back, but I lowered my head and walked. The snow was deep, drifting against the fence. I trudged through it, my breath pluming in white clouds before me. I made my way to the alley, the service road that ran behind the properties. It was plowed but icy. I didn't take my car. The garage door opener would wake them. The engine noise would be a siren. I had to walk. I had to walk 2 miles to the 24-hour diner on the main road where I could call a car. The walk was a brutal physical ordeal. My knees ached. The cold seeped through my boots, numbing my toes. My face went numb. Every step was a battle against the instinct to lie down, to rest, to surrender to the freeze. But I kept moving. I marched to the rhythm of my anger. Left, right, left, right. They wanted me dead. Left, right. They wanted my money. Left, right. I reached the diner 40 minutes later. I was shivering uncontrollably, my eyebrows frosted with ice. I stumbled inside. The warmth was painful as it hit my frozen skin. The waitress, a tired woman with kind eyes, looked up from the counter. "Honey, you look like you walked out of a freezer," she said. "My car broke down," I lied, my teeth chattering. "Just need coffee and a phone." I sat in a booth drinking black coffee until my hands stopped shaking. I used the diner's landline to call a private car service, one that Leonard used for high-profile clients. No apps, no tracking. Cash payment. The car arrived 10 minutes later, a black sedan that looked like a hearse but felt like a sanctuary. I climbed into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Loop," I said. "Banks and Associates." I slept on the ride. A deep, dreamless blackness. I woke up when the driver tapped on the glass. We were parked in front of a steel and glass tower that scraped the gray morning sky. It was 6 a.m. The city was waking up. I paid the driver and walked into the lobby. The security guard knew me. Leonard had put me on the list. "Mr. King," he nodded. "Mr. Banks is expecting you." I rode the elevator to the 45th floor. My ears popped. The doors slid open, revealing a reception area that smelled of expensive leather and fresh espresso. Leonard was standing there. He wasn't wearing his usual suit jacket. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He looked like a general in a bunker. He walked over and gripped my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "You made it," he said. I pulled the go bag off my shoulder and dropped it on the floor. "I made it," I said. But the house didn't. I think I melted a doorframe. Leonard smiled, a grim, tight expression. "Small price to pay. Come in. The war room is ready." We walked into his corner office. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, a vast expanse of frozen gray water. But the real view was on the conference table. It was covered in files, hard drives, and monitors. 2 junior associates were typing furiously on laptops. Leonard pulled out a chair for me. "Sit. Eat. We have work to do." He pushed a plate of pastries and a fresh coffee toward me. I ate, famished. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. While I ate, Leonard briefed me. "The assets are frozen," he said. "We got the notification at 3 a.m. Todd tried to access the Cayman account online. It triggered the trap. We have his IP address. We have the login attempt recorded." "Good," I said, wiping crumbs from my mouth. "What about the doctor?" Leonard picked up a file. "Dr. Evans. Disgraced. Desperate. We ran a background check. He has 3 malpractice suits pending and a gambling debt that rivals your son-in-law's. He didn't just sign that paper for cash. He signed it because Todd promised him a cut of the estate. We have the trail. And the hearing I asked." "Emergency session," Leonard said. 10 a.m. "Your daughter filed the paperwork electronically an hour ago. She is claiming you are violent, delusional, and missing. She wants immediate temporary custody of the estate to pay for your search and rescue." I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Search and rescue. "She wants to pay off the loan shark." "Exactly," Leonard said. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Here is the play, Harold. We don't just defend. We attack. We don't just show up and say you are sane. We walk in there and we drop the guillotine." I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the tissue with the blue vial. I placed it on the mahogany table. "Analyze this," I said. "There is still a drop left." Leonard looked at the vial. He didn't touch it. "Digitalis?" he asked. "Concentrated," I said. "Homemade. Clumsy but lethal." Leonard nodded to one of the associates. "Bag it. Get it to the private lab. Rush courier. I want the results by 9:30. He looked back at me. "We have the financial motive. We have the forensic evidence of the poisoning. We have the UV photos of the attempted robbery you sent me. We have the recording of the conspiracy to commit murder." "Is it enough?" I asked. "Is it enough to put them away forever?" Leonard looked out the window at the rising sun. "Harold, by noon today, they won't just be broke. They will be facing federal charges. Attempted murder is a state crime, but wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. That brings the feds into play. And once we show the judge that they tried to use the court system as a weapon to facilitate a homicide." He turned back to me, his eyes cold and hard. "The judge is going to lock the doors and call the marshals himself." I sat back in the leather chair. I felt the warmth of the coffee spreading through my chest. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the target. I was the architect of their destruction. "Let them go to court," I said softly. "Let them stand there and lie. I want to see their faces when I walk in." "You will," Leonard said. "You will see everything." I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my strength. The night was over. The long, cold walk was done. Now it was time for the fire. The heavy oak doors of the Cook County Courthouse were designed to intimidate, to enforce a sense of solemnity and order. But as I stood on the other side of the threshold, adjusting the cuffs of my suit, I knew they were just wood. Wood that could be broken, burned, or in my case, simply pushed open. I stood next to Leonard Banks, who checked his watch with the precision of a sniper, waiting for a target to cross the crosshairs. It was 9:58. The emergency hearing had been in session for 18 minutes. We weren't late. We were timing it. Leonard wanted them to commit. He wanted them to say the words on the record. He wanted the court stenographer to type out every lie so that when the hammer fell, it would crush them completely. I could hear the muffled voices through the gap in the doors. My daughter was speaking. Her voice was thin, trembling, a masterful performance of a traumatized victim. "He isn't the father I knew." "Your Honor," Rebecca sobbed. The sound of her crying used to break my heart. Now it just made my pulse steady. It was like listening to a chemical reaction bubbling in a beaker, predictable, volatile, and ultimately controllable. He looked at me with such hatred. He poured the liquid into my soup, and he smiled. He watched me eat it. If my husband hadn't rushed me to the hospital. She trailed off, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. I pictured her in there. She would be wearing no makeup, probably dressed in something modest, and slightly disheveled to suggest distress. She was playing to the cheap seats, even though the room was nearly empty, save for the judge, the bailiff, and the court clerk. "And where is Mr. King now?" the judge asked. His voice was weary, the voice of a man who had seen too many family tragedies and just wanted to clear his docket before lunch. "We don't know," Todd answered. His voice was deep, filled with a grave, manly concern that masked the terror of his debt. "We locked his bedroom door last night for his own safety, as Dr. Evans recommended. But when we went to check on him this morning, the door was broken. He used some kind of tool. He ran away into the storm. He is out there right now, Your Honor." Rebecca cried, her voice rising in pitch. "He is confused. He is violent. He is 70 years old, and he is wandering around Chicago in a blizzard. We are terrified he is going to hurt himself or someone else. We just need the authority to find him. We need access to his accounts to hire private security to pay for the medical transport. We can't help him if our hands are tied." It was a compelling story. It had everything. The dangerous, senile patriarch, the loving, desperate children, the ticking clock of the weather. I looked at Leonard. He nodded. It was time. The judge sighed. "Based on the medical affidavit from Dr. Evans and the testimony provided here regarding the poisoning incident, I am inclined to agree that Mr. King presents an immediate danger to himself and the public. The court is prepared to grant emergency temporary guardianship to the petitioners Rebecca and Todd." He picked up his pen. I could visualize the ink flowing, the signature that would sign away my life, my freedom, and my fortune. Leonard pushed the doors open. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet courtroom. The heavy wood slammed against the stops. We walked in. I didn't shuffle. I didn't tremble. I walked with the long, confident strides of a man who owns the ground beneath his feet. Leonard walked beside me, his briefcase swinging like a weapon. Todd and Rebecca turned in their seats. The motion was synchronized like two puppets on the same string. Their faces were a study in absolute paralyzing shock. Rebecca's mouth fell open, her fake tears drying instantly in the heat of her panic. Todd gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. They were looking at a ghost. They were looking at the man they thought was freezing to death in a snowbank, the man whose mind was supposed to be mush. Instead, they saw Harold King, freshly shaved, wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than their car eyes, clear and cold as the winter sky. "Wait, Your Honor." Leonard boomed, his voice filling the cavernous room. The judge looked up, startled, his pen hovering inches from the order. "Who is this? This is a closed hearing." I am Leonard Banks representing Mr. Harold King, Leonard said, gesturing to me. And we have a counter motion to present. Specifically, a motion to dismiss with prejudice and a request for the immediate arrest of the petitioners. Arrest. Todd stood up, knocking his chair back. It clattered loudly on the floor. What is this? How did you— Sit down, sir, the bailiff barked, stepping forward. Your Honor, this man is dangerous, Rebecca shrieked, pointing at me. Her finger was shaking. He is having a psychotic break. He shouldn't be here. He should be in a hospital. I stopped in the middle of the aisle. I looked at the judge. I didn't look at my daughter. She wasn't worth my gaze anymore. I am not psychotic. Your Honor, I said. My voice was calm, measured, the voice of a professor lecturing a classroom of unruly students. I am also not missing. I am standing right here, and I would like to address the court regarding the attempted murder that took place in my home last night. Attempted murder, the judge asked, his eyes narrowing. He looked from me to the trembling couple at the plaintiff's table. Mr. King, your daughter claims you poisoned her. I walked forward until I was standing at the defense table. I placed my hands on the wood. She claims a lot of things, Your Honor, I said. She claims I am senile. She claims I am poor. She claims she loves me. All of them are lies. Todd was sweating profusely now. I could smell it from 5 feet away. He looked at the judge, his eyes wide and desperate. He is lying. He is making this up. Look at the doctor's report. Dr. Evans said— Leonard stepped forward and slapped a thick file onto the judge's bench. Dr. Evans has lost his medical license in 3 states, Your Honor, Leonard said smoothly. And as of an hour ago, he is currently in police custody for writing fraudulent prescriptions. We also have the bank records showing a cash withdrawal of $5,000 from Todd Miller's account. Yesterday money that was handed to Dr. Evans just before he signed that affidavit. Todd made a choking sound. Rebecca looked at him, horror dawning on her face. That is circumstantial, Todd yelled. You can't prove that. We can prove a lot more than that, I said softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I held it up. It caught the light of the courtroom chandeliers. Your Honor, I said. This drive contains audio recordings made in my home over the last 48 hours. It contains my son-in-law admitting to debts owed to illegal lenders. It contains my daughter expressing regret that the poison she put in my soup didn't kill me fast enough. And it contains video footage from last night of these 2 people trying to break into my safe with a tire iron while they thought I was asleep. Rebecca let out a wail, a sound of pure animal fear. No. That is illegal. You can't record us in our own house. It is my house, Rebecca, I said, turning to her finally. My deed, my title, my rules. And in Illinois, recording a crime in progress to protect one's life falls under a very specific set of exceptions. The judge picked up the file Leonard had put down. He opened it. He looked at the photos of the glowing handprints on the safe. He looked at the transcript of the audio. His face went hard. He looked at Todd and Rebecca with the cold detachment of the law. Bailiff the judge said, his voice quiet and dangerous. Lock the doors. Todd scrambled. He actually tried to run. He lunged for the side exit, pushing past his chair, his eyes fixed on freedom. Sit down! The bailiff shouted, his hand going to his taser. Todd froze. He looked back at me. He looked at the man he had tried to gaslight, the man he had tried to bury. He saw no mercy. He saw only the chemist watching the final reaction take place. Your Honor, Leonard said, opening his briefcase and pulling out another document. We also have the toxicology report from a private lab time-stamped this morning. It analyzes the residue found in a blue vial that Mr. King recovered from the trash after his daughter poisoned his soup. It matches the digitalis found in Rebecca Miller's system. She didn't get poisoned by accident. She got poisoned because I switched the plates. The judge dropped his pen. He looked at Rebecca. "You tried to poison your father?" he asked, his voice filled with disgust. Rebecca was sobbing now, just real tears this time, the tears of a child who realizes the game is over. "He has so much money," she screamed, pointing at me. "He has millions, and he made us live like beggars. He watched us struggle. He owes us." There it was, the truth, finally stripped of all the pretense of love and care. I looked at her. I felt a pang of sadness, a ghost of the love I used to have, but I crushed it. "I don't owe you anything, Rebecca," I said. "I gave you life. You tried to take mine. The ledger is balanced." The judge slammed his gavel down. It sounded like a thunderclap. "Motion for guardianship denied with prejudice," the judge roared. "Bailiff, take Mr. and Mrs. Miller into custody. I am holding them in contempt until the district attorney arrives to file formal charges for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy." The bailiff moved in. He pulled Todd's hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Rebecca was next. She screamed as the metal cuffs bit into her wrists. "Dad, Dad, please don't let them take me. I am pregnant. I am sick." I watched them being dragged away. I watched them hauled through the side door, kicking and screaming, their dignity gone, their future erased. When the door closed, silence returned to the courtroom. The judge looked at me. He looked at the file. He looked at the man standing tall in the center of the room. "Mr. King," he said softly, I am very sorry." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I turned to Leonard. He was packing up his briefcase. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "It is done," he said. "Not yet," I said. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snow-covered city. Somewhere out there, a loan shark was checking his watch. Somewhere, a real estate agent was wondering why the listing for my house had been pulled. Somewhere, a life was waiting for me. "I have one more stop to make," I said. "Where?" Leonard asked. "The jail," I said. "I have to say goodbye, and I have to tell them exactly what I did with the money they killed themselves to get." Leonard paused. "You don't have to do that, Harold. You won." "I know," I said, turning back to him, "but the reaction isn't finished until the residue is cleared away. I want them to know. I want them to sit in that cell for the rest of their lives knowing that the fortune they wanted simply doesn't exist anymore." I adjusted my tie. I checked my reflection in the glass of the courtroom door. The old man was gone. The victim was gone. "Let's go, Leonard," I said. "I have a donation to make." The courtroom doors swung open again, but this time it wasn't a lawyer making an entrance. It was the district attorney flanked by 2 federal agents in windbreakers that read FBI. They moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a mudslide. Todd, who was currently being wrestled into a chair by the bailiff, went still. The color that had returned to his face during his screaming match drained away instantly, leaving him looking like wet dough. District Attorney Miller didn't look at Todd. He walked straight to the bench, placing a heavy banker's box on the judge's desk. "Your Honor," he said, his voice gravelly and bored, as if he did this every Tuesday. "The state is upgrading the charges. We are adding conspiracy to commit capital murder, wire fraud, and racketeering. And the federal agents here would like to have a word about the interstate transmission of threats involving the loan sharks Mr. Miller has been doing business with." Todd sputtered. "Racketeering? That is insane. I am a businessman." Leonard stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He simply connected his laptop to the courtroom's AV system. The large monitors mounted on the walls flickered to life. The image was grainy but high definition. It was my kitchen. The timestamp was 48 hours ago. There was Rebecca. She was standing at the island, the camera hidden in the button of my cardigan, which I had draped over the chair earlier that day to test the angle, caught her profile perfectly. We watched in silence as she pulled the blue vial from her pocket. We watched her uncork it. We watched the clear liquid drip into the soup. 1, 2, 3 drops. Rebecca, who was handcuffed and weeping in the jury box where they had seated her, looked up at the screen. She let out a low, keen sound like a wounded animal. There was no denying it. There was no parsley confusion. It was a calculated, cold-blooded dosing. Then the video cut. The screen went black and the audio took over. It was Todd's voice, crystal clear. 7 days, Sal. I know. 500,000. Todd squeezed his eyes shut. He knew that voice. He knew that fear. We force the issue. We get him committed. Once he is in, we liquidate him. The audio shifted. It was the sound of metal on metal. The sound of the tire iron hitting my safe. If Evans doesn't sign, we suffocate him with a pillow. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. The court reporter had stopped typing, her mouth slightly ajar. The judge looked from the screen to the two defendants. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was something worse. It was indifferent. He looked at them like they were waste that needed to be flushed. Mr. Banks, the judge said, turning to Leonard, I assume you have authentication for these chain of custody as established, Your Honor. Leonard replied, handing over a thick file. We also have Mr. King's actual medical records dated 3 days ago from the Mayo Clinic. He underwent a full neurological workup. He handed the file to the judge. MRI cognitive testing blood work, Leonard listed. His brain function is in the 99th percentile for his age. He isn't senile. Your Honor, he is probably sharper than anyone in this room. The judge flipped through the pages. He looked at the fake report Dr. Evans had signed, then at the real one. He closed the folder with a snap. This is a circus, he muttered. He looked at the federal agents. They are all yours. The agents moved in. They didn't use the standard handcuffs. They used the heavy transport chains, the ones that link your waist to your ankles. The sound of the heavy steel ratcheting shut was final. Clack, clack, clack. Todd tried to stand up to make one last speech, one last desperate attempt to spin the narrative. He set us up, Todd shouted, spit flying. It was entrapment. He wanted us to do it. He left the door open. He is the criminal. One of the agents simply pushed him down, not gently. You have the right to remain silent, the agent said, his voice devoid of emotion. I suggest you start using it right now, Mr. Miller, before you talk your way into the electric chair. Rebecca wasn't screaming anymore. She was catatonic. She stared at me as they hauled her up. Her eyes were empty black holes in a pale face. She looked at my suit. She looked at Leonard. She looked at the freedom I still possessed. Why, she whispered. It was a single word carrying the weight of a lifetime of entitlement. Because you broke the contract, Rebecca, I said softly, my voice carrying across the room. Parents take care of children. Children cherish parents. You mistook care for weakness, and you mistook my silence for stupidity. The agents hauled them toward the rear exit. The heavy doors opened, revealing a hallway lined with press. The flashbulbs popped like lightning, illuminating their shame in strobing bursts of white light. I watched them go. I watched the backs of their heads, the slump of their shoulders. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, clean sense of completion, like washing a beaker after a long, dangerous experiment. The toxic elements were removed. The lab was safe. The judge banged his gavel, dismissing the session. Leonard began unplugging his laptop. That went well, he said, closing the lid. I looked at the blank screen where my daughter's crime had just played out. It went exactly as calculated, I said. I buttoned my jacket. I checked my reflection in the monitor. The man looking back was tired, yes, but he was free. and he had a promise to keep. "Come on, Leonard," I said, turning away from the empty defendant's table. "Let's go to the jail. I want them to hear the rest of the story. I want them to know where the money went, and then I want to buy a map. I hear Arizona is beautiful this time of year." The visiting room smelled of bleach and stale desperation, a scent that clung to the cinder block walls and the scratched plexiglass barrier. I sat on the metal stool, my posture upright, my hands folded calmly on the ledge. On the other side of the glass, Rebecca was led in by a guard. She looked like a stranger. The arrogant woman who had sneered at me in my own kitchen was gone, replaced by a haggard figure in a bright orange jumpsuit, her hair matted, her eyes swollen and red. She sat down and snatched the phone receiver from the cradle, her movements jerky and frantic. "Dad!" she screamed into the receiver, her voice tinny and distorted. "You have to get me out of here. You have to pay for a lawyer. The public defender is useless. They are talking about 20 years, Dad. 20 years." I picked up my receiver slowly. I didn't speak immediately. I just watched her. I studied her face, looking for a trace of the little girl I used to read to sleep, but all I saw was the woman who had wished for my death because I was taking up space. "Don't just sit there," she shrieked, slamming her hand against the glass. "Todd told me about the patent. He told me about the money. You have $15 million hidden away. You have been hoarding it while we struggled. Use it. Get me a real attorney, and I will sign whatever you want. I will go away. Just get me out." I leaned forward. My voice was soft, steady, and cold as liquid nitrogen. "I don't have $15 million, Rebecca." She froze. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching my face for the lie. What she whispered. "You are lying." Todd saw the files. The lawyer said, "I had $15 million, I corrected her. Past tense. As of 9 this morning, the Harold King estate has been fully liquidated. I reached into the breast pocket of my suit and pulled out a folded document. I pressed it flat against the glass so she could read the bold print. It was a receipt. A transfer confirmation. $15 million, I read aloud, savoring every syllable. Donated in full. Half to the National Center for Responsible Gaming to help people like your husband. And half to the Elder Justice Coalition to protect people like me from people like you." Rebecca stared at the paper. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She read the numbers. She saw the zeros. She saw the date. Today. "You gave it away," she choked out. "You gave it all away. Every penny I said. I sold the house to a developer an hour ago. The keys are gone. The accounts are closed. There is no inheritance, Rebecca. There is no bail money. There is no golden parachute. You wanted the money so badly, you were willing to kill for it. Now the money is gone. And you are still here." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She slumped against the ledge, sliding down until her face was level with the counter. "Why," she sobbed. "Why would you do this? Because you broke the heart of the only person who would have saved you," I said. "You chose the money over the father. Now you have neither." She started to scream, then a raw, primal sound of hatred and loss. "I hate you. I hope you die alone. I hope you rot in hell." I stood up. I hung the receiver back in its cradle, cutting off her voice. I looked at her one last time. She was mouthing curses, pounding on the glass. But to me, she was just a silent movie, a tragedy I had already finished watching. I turned and walked out of the room. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me, sealing the tomb I had built for them. Outside, the air was crisp and cold, the sun reflecting off the snowdrifts. Leonard was waiting at the curb. He wasn't standing next to a sedan. He was leaning against the side of a 45-foot luxury RV, a silver Leviathan, that gleamed in the winter light. It was brand new, fully loaded, and paid for with the only money I had kept, the cash from the sale of my old sedan and the contents of my checking account. Leonard handed me a set of keys and a thick envelope. "The transfer is complete," he said. "You are officially a man of modest means, Harold. The charities are ecstatic." "Let them be," I said, taking the keys. "It is better used than it would have gotten in this family." I shook Leonard's hand. "Thank you, my friend, for believing me." I climbed into the driver's seat. It sat high above the road. The windshield was a panoramic view of a world I had ignored for too long. I smelled the new leather. I felt the hum of the engine as I turned the key. It was a deep, powerful growl. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. There was no one to navigate, no one to complain about the heat, just a map of the American Southwest and a travel mug of black coffee. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was vibrating. A call from the county jail. Rebecca trying to claw her way back in. Or maybe Todd realizing that his 7 days were up and he was trapped in a cage with no way to pay his debt. I rolled down the window. I popped the back off the phone and pulled out the SIM card. It was a tiny piece of plastic that connected me to a life of lies and betrayal. I snapped it in half with my thumb and forefinger. I tossed the pieces out the window into the slushy gray snow of the gutter. I put the RV in gear. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't look back at the skyline of Chicago, the city where I had raised a daughter and buried a wife and survived a murder. I looked forward. The road was a ribbon of asphalt stretching out toward the horizon. I turned on the radio. Classic rock filled the cabin. I pressed the gas pedal. The RV surged forward, leaving the jail, the court, and the wreckage of my family behind. I was 69 years old. I had no home. I had no children. But as I merged onto the highway heading west toward the setting sun, I realized I had something more valuable. I had the rest of my life. And for the first time in 40 years, it belonged entirely to me. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned that greed is a corrosive acid that burns through every bond. For decades, I believed my role was to provide and protect, thinking my silence was a shield for my family. In reality, it was the blindfold they used to lead me to the slaughter. True wealth isn't the millions in the bank. It is the clarity to see people for who they truly are, not who you wish them to be. If you are sitting at a table where respect is no longer served, have the courage to walk away before you are forced to switch the plates. If you have ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself, tell me your story in the comments below.